All right, so let's work through a hip mobility routine. So when a lot of people think about mobility, they think about stretching, but there's also strength around a range of motion that we can get. This kind of added stability, added range of motion that we're looking for. That's not just a static stretch. So today we're going to go through some increased range of motion exercises, and they might feel like strengthening movements. We're trying to move that hip through as much range of motion as it can tolerate, but still move well and stay stable through the pelvis and work different range of motions and internal, external rotation, hip abduction, adduction, flexion and extension, trying to work all the way around that hip motion to see if we can gain any added range of motion consistently over time. The biggest thing here is you might see a change in range of motion in the short term, but the real change is done from consistently doing this time and time and time again. Okay, so I'll start on hands and knees here, and you're going to do some hip circles forward and backwards. So if I'm here, I keep that knee bent and really try to move from that hip and then come around the circle forward. And I would do 10 of these on each side. So if I'm cycling through here, you're going to do 10 hip circles forward and then 10 hip circles backwards, and trying to go through as much motion as possible. The challenge is the tilt side to side. So if I do this towards you, and if I do this while I'm doing it, I'm compensating with a pelvic rotation. So try to keep your pelvis stationary and pointed forward, and just try to move through as much motion as you can around that pelvic position. And the challenge is going to be keeping that pelvis stable as you move forward and back. Okay, so that's a hip circle. Next is going to be a hip leg lift here to the side. So if I'm in this position again, leg comes out and I lift that leg up and down. Again, I'm not trying to rotate as much here. I'm just trying to lift, 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 and you should feel muscle activation kind of deep within that hip there. You might get towards a crampy sensation. Stop, don't push through the cramp, but just try to lift as high as you can without creating that sensation of cramping. After you do it on one side 10 times, we'll switch and we'll do it on the other side 10 times. And you might notice that you can move through more range of motion or move more easily one side versus the other. Just keep that in mind, and as you do more and more of this, see if the two start to get closer and closer together. Okay? Next, we're gonna get in that same position, but now I'll go forward and backwards. So if I'm here, I'm gonna go back and forward, back and forward. Just try to move through as much motion as possible. If I'm trying to go forward too much, you're gonna notice that you really start to tip at the pelvis again. We're trying to hold that pelvis stable and move through as much range of motion as possible. Okay, so we've got our hip circles forward, hip circles backwards, leg lifts to the side, forward and back range of motion, 10 of each on both sides. The next one is going to be a 90-90 switch. So we're trying to find this position here where our leg is out in front of us and our other leg is by the side, and kind of make this like figure four type position here. What I want you to do here is I want you to be able to keep yourself upright with your hands and rotate from one side to the other and try to keep your pelvis down on the ground and rotate back and forth. And we're just going to go back and forth 10 times or so each one. I'm just trying to work that internal and external rotation. This is more deep tissue here, trying to work through that range of motion. This can be challenging. If you can't get into this position and you're only working through a small range of motion, that's totally fine. Like, this is as far as you can go. That's the place you're going to start. You're just going to try to work back and forth and eventually hopefully be able to get those legs down and those hips forward. Some people are going to be able to stay in this position here and just kind of lean back and do it, but we really want to be able to sit up and over top of that hip. And if you can't do that, we're just going to where you can. So you're going through as much motion as possible without causing irritation, okay? The next one's can be challenging. So we get back in this position, and now we try to work the hip at that end range of motion position. So here's internal rotation, and you're going to try to lift that leg up. Some of you are going to be able to lift it. Some of you are going to have to hold your foot, lift it up, and try to hold it in that position, and then drop it. People will at times get a cramp up in that hip. If that's happening, shake that leg out, maybe switch sides, come back to it later, and you're just trying to be able to stay in this position and lift that heel up without feeling like you're rocking forward and back. We're staying tall, lift that hip, tall, lift that hip. If you can't, you grab your foot, you lift it up, you try to hold that position and let it come down. Again, 10 of each of those. Let's keep it simple, keep it easy, working through some good hip range of motion that's going to stress the muscle tissue and try to strengthen that muscle tissue at the end range of motion to help gain more ownership over that range of motion instead of just doing a static hold.